Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Welcome to the REFORMA Virtual Spanish Language Book Buzz Winter Series. My name is Patty Valdovinos, and I am a librarian at the Los Angeles Public Library in the Multilingual Collections Department. I am also president of the Los Angeles chapter of REFORMA. This free event is open to librarians, educators, students, and professionals interested in serving Latinos and Spanish-speaking communities. In our third session of the series, we have Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial, Cinco Books, Vintage Español, and Saduquia, I hope I pronounced that right, group, who will be featuring their new adult Spanish language titles. But first, I would like to introduce our special guest, Paola Ramos. Ana Campos and I will have a conversation with her. So let me introduce.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. do the intro first. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I got excited.
I feel you. All right. So Paola Ramos is a host and correspondent for Vice and Vice News, as well as a contributor to Telemundo News, MSNBC. Ramos was the deputy director of Hispanic media for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign and a political appointee during the Barack Obama administration. And she also served in President Obama's 2012 reelection campaign. All these years are all confusing me. I'm like, what year are we on?
Me too.
Oh, man. She's a former fellow at Emerson Collective. Ramos received her MA in public policy from Harvard Kennedy School and her BA from Barnard College, Columbia University. She also lives in Brooklyn. Paola's recently published book is titled Latinx, En busca de las voces que redefinen la identidad latina, or In search of the voices redefining Latino identity, not community. So now Ana and I will start off with a few questions for you, Paola.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Seriously.
Thank you, Paola. It's an honor. So we'll start right off because we have a very short time. Why the term Latinx?
So I think, you both know it more than anyone. I think Latinx has become such a controversial term. And so this book is merely an attempt to sort of demystify the word. Now, the way that I see it right now, as it currently stands in books and the vocabulary and dictionaries, is that there is no word in this moment that is fully capturing who we are as the 60 million Latinos that live in this country, right? And so Latinx, that X that people are so scared of, is simply an invitation for any Latino that has ever felt left out of our story, whether you're Afro-Latino, queer Latino, trans, liberal or conservative. It's the word that we get to sort of build a new story, right? Without these words, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, that carry so much weight to it, so much history to it, so many constraints to it, Latinx at least is starting to take us somewhere else.
And you mentioned this in your book, but Latinx is not a new term, right? So I know folks think it's a new term, but it's really not. So can you touch a little about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the word starts to sort of pop up in online circles in the early 2000s, right? And it originally starts particularly from like Latinx queer activists that start inserting the X as a way to include gender nonconforming folks, queer folks, trans folks. That word then gets a lot more momentum after obviously the like awful Pulse incident in Orlando. But the interesting thing about the word is that suddenly you see more people that are starting to casually use it, right? Suddenly you see like straight Latinx activists, you see politicians, you see Afro-Latinos starting to use it. And so I think that's the moment that we're in, where to a lot of us, the word feels right. The word feels a little bit better than the previous ones. At the same time, there's many among us, right, including many that I know, that are like, what, que carajo es Latinx? Like, do not use that word, which I think is part of this conversation, right? Is there something about seeing all of us under the same light, right? Where like Latinos all of a sudden understand that, they too are Black, they too are trans. Is there something about that image that makes some people reject it? And I think that's why this conversation is so important.
Yes, that is a very good point. And then I know adding X is not new. I know, and especially like the term to try to make it like any term, right? We
in
try
the
to make
Chicano movement.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a good point. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, how this is not a new term. And I know folks
totally
are always like, it's new. I'm like, no. All right, question number 2 we have for you. The Latinx community is diverse in religion, culture, politics, etc. The list can go on and on and on. But is there one thing that you see we all have in common?
Yes, I mean, I think, of course, like we are, it's interesting. I just got back from Colombia and the Panama border. And if you say the word Latinx there again, they're like, no, right? So I will say that to me, like Latinx is it's a very US specific term. No, it is a term that is telling the story of what it means to be us in this country, in this time right now. I think we are extremely diverse, right? That is the beauty of us. But I think among all of us, regardless of your generation, there is someone in our families, right? Regardless if you're a Democrat, Republican, Black or white, English or Spanglish, whatever, there is someone in your family that migrated to this country with one idea only. And the idea was to give the younger one of us, to give others in their family the ability to be freer, to have more opportunities, and to sort of pursue this dream. Whether or not that dream is an illusion, that's a whole other conversation. But there is one person in our families and in our blood that came here with the same idea, right? And that is so we could have these conversations and so that we could be freer. And so I think in that line, that's where I like to think that what does unite us amidst all of these crazy divisions that we're going through, and we're very in a very tense situation in this moment, what I do like to think is that with that in mind, and that story in mind, we are open people, right? We are progressive people. We do, at the end of the day, embrace each other more than we think.
That's a really good point, I think. We forget about that. Go ahead.
We do. No. My only point too is I go back to like the election, right? Obviously, because I was in Florida so much, and obviously and part of my family is Cuban. The other one's Mexican. So like the Cubans and the Mexicans, like, do not get along. But I always think of, in Florida, Latinos seem super divided, right? You have the Cubans and the Mexicans. The Cubans, as we know, Florida Cuban Americans voted for Donald Trump in great numbers. Yeah. They also happen to be one of the segments that are most enrolled in Obamacare, right? At the highest percentage of Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. And so all this to say is that when you take the politics aside, the issues that we all care about are still the same. We all still want more healthcare. We all still want more rights. And so I think sometimes it's important to put the politics aside and come face to face and you see something different.
Yeah, it's like the health aspect and you make a good point. And I think even as a person who is heavily involved in politics and can see the divide, I needed that reminder myself because there is the commonality that we all aspire and hope.
That's right.
No matter how you frame it, we all are wanting that better life.
I think so, yeah.
So thank you.
So I'll ask the next question, and I think it connects. In your book, you focus more on a qualitative approach by emphasizing oral stories and experiences of members of the Latinx community. Why was this approach so important to you?
I mean, I think typically in the past, when they refer to us, they refer to us in numbers. It's like we have this great power, and it's typically what you usually hear is, we're the largest minority voting bloc, 30 million voters, or they say, our purchasing power is insane, right? I think it's like $1.7 trillion in purchasing power as Latinos, or they'll, equate undocumented immigrants with taxpayers, in dollar signs, because undocumented immigrants, they'll say pay $27 billion. And so the story about us for so long has been in numbers, right? And then along with that, the story was always when is this sleeping giant going to awake, right? The numbers are so high, when will we awaken? And so I think in those numbers and in these stats, we've lost the stories, right? We've lost what makes us so complex. We've lost all the hybrids that are among us. We've lost the understanding of who the giant really is and how have we transformed in the last decades. And so for me, it was important to push those numbers aside, push the stereotypes aside, and just listen to people. Ask questions that people haven't asked us in years, starting with, who the hell are we? How am I different from my parents, right? What does it mean to be an Afro-Latino? And how is it that I grew up in this country and never truly understood that Afro-Latinos were part of my own community, right? Being Cuban, that's crazy. And so the book is asking the most basic questions of who we are, And that starts with stories, and it starts with like giving a microphone to someone and allowing them to have that space. And when you do that, numbers start to, you start to see power differently, not so much in the numbers, but in the places that the numbers aren't sort of pointing us to.
That's great.
And for this question, actually, Anna and I were having a conversation about it because we also realized it was a qualitative approach. And we like started having our own conversation with this, and it really shed light on how we do get mentioned, because we were also surprised, right, Anna, of how like there were a few numbers mentioned, but it focused more on the oral part. And I think we have such mixed families. It's important to realize that and hear that.
I think so. And again, it's like 1% of the whole story, right? Like I think what I was able to write and put in words is like 1% of what's actually going on. But it starts with sort of putting attention where there are no numbers that are, telling us that it's worthy to put attention in those places.
Yeah, it's like you get lost in translation through the numbers, which is weird because
Exactly.
I think a lot of us are used to believing numbers and the power in numbers and like the numerical power. But I think oral stories, as someone who grew up with qualitative research, in like the education, I think there's power in that. We forget that a lot when it comes. Yes. So thank you. Question number 4. I'm on number 4. Yes, we are. I can keep track of this.
I'll keep track for you, Pam. Number 4.
Oh man, this happens to me.
Anna is keeping us on track.
I know. I'm
She's
terrible.
like, we got a program to run. Yeah. No.
All right. So this one's kind of a long one. So in your story about Afro-Latina journalist, I always want to call her
Ilia Calderon.
Ilia Calderon. Yes.
Okay.
You reinforce the importance of why representation matters in the Latinx community, as is often the case in many other cultures. Lighter-skinned individuals are favored and represented in the media, while darker-skinned individuals are portrayed in negative ways. What do you hope this part of your book accomplishes for your readers, especially since anti-Blackness is deeply and silently rooted in our community?
Yeah, I mean, so just for reference, right? Like, so my dad does a newscast in Univision for years. His co-anchor was Maria Elena Salinas. And so that was the image, that we, especially in LA, that we grew up with, watching like my dad and Maria Elena Salinas on our TV screens. And then suddenly Ilia Calderon, completely transformed that image. And she has become the first national Afro-Latina anchor in, US history, right? And so that is transforming our culture in way deeper ways that I was even imagining it. And so the purpose of that chapter is simply to point out a couple of things. The first one is that we too, including myself, like we too as Latinos perpetuate racism. And that number one. Number two, that again, a very simple understanding that among the 60 million of us, there are at least 4 million Afro-Latinos. That for decades have not felt like they were too Latino to be part of us or too Black to be part of them. And that sort of balance and struggle has to end, and it starts with us. And then, the chapter takes us a little bit back in history, right? The erasure that we are sort of implementing now in the United States starts across the border. No, it starts in Latin America. It starts with our own sort of home countries, erasing them from the Constitution, from institutions, from history. And so again, there's at least like 170 million Latinos in Latin America that are Afro descendants, no? And so all it is a little bit of like a slap in our face to understand the role that we're playing in sort of perpetuating this racism at a moment where obviously the country is having these conversations. And I think there's been this like idea, and I include myself for years, where we were like, no, just because we're Latinas doesn't mean that we too are part of the problem. And we are part of the problem. And I think there was a beautiful moment that we saw this summer in the streets during George Floyd, when suddenly you had the younger generation of Latinos con las pancartas, right, that said, tu lucha es mi lucha, no? And it was to the Black community, but it was also to Afro-Latinos. And I think there's been a switch where like at least the younger generation of us understands that this is a joint fight, no? And I think that's a big change that I'm seeing between sort of my parents' generation and us.
Yeah, and the conversations with our parents about this anti-Blackness that has like
completely
lived in, yeah.
And there needs to be more Ilia Calderon, right? Like Ilia Calderon is the only Afro-Latino voice in all of Spanish language media. nationally, like that, that's crazy. And so it starts with these institutions having those conversations, which they're starting to.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the conversations that I was seeing on social media, like independent wise, was the lack of Afro-Latinos in these like news media outlets, right? Because there was even talk about how like they were perpetuating anti-Blackness, which was a very important conversation to have, I think, independently with your parents, because
that's right.
They are the ones viewing these news stations. So it was like you were contradicting. Right. And so it was like huge conversation. And it's a reminder that having Ilia Calderon, the only one, puts a lot of pressure on this woman, like to have to, so I think
a lot of, and I remember this summer I was on Telemundo, and I forgot I won't name names now, but we were not to put them on the spot, but we were having this conversation.
Name names.
I did. But we were having a conversation, and I remember one of the anchors said, again, I think a lot of this is like us undoing our own biases and what we've been taught. But I remember the anchor looked at me and she said, no hay que ver color. Aquí el color no existe. And that's part of that. I remember in the moment, I was like, wait a second. And that's what viewers have grown up with. No, that's what I grew up with. No hay color. El racismo no existe. And then obviously, that person was called out, and then, back and so forth. But I think, again, that was like in the midst of what this country was going through. And here was an anchor sort of perpetuating it without even knowing, what was happening.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't even like news. I mean, I was listening to the radio. I remember, I think I reached out to Anna, both Annas in the conversation about, it was like news outlet. I mean, like radio stations were also and like you couldn't escape it. So
no.
Yes. All right, Anna, next question.
Okay. I'm going to add a comment to what you're talking about. When you look at colors, Lindsay Davis, I think she's ABC, she wrote a children's books, and she said something about, yes, there is color. We see color, but you don't put a value to color, and that's what matters. And to me, that was very powerful. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. We see color. We're not blind, but don't put a value to it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go to the next one. Okay, so in your book, you highlight various communities of Latinx. For example, I was surprised to read about Latinos or Latinx who are Muslims.
Oh, yeah.
What surprised you the most of the diversity of the Latinx community?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I'm talking to y'all from New York City, and that was a big eye-opening sort of experience for me, understanding like how big the, Latinx, Latino Muslim community is like right here. And I had moments like that throughout the entire experience, right? Like, I think a lot of it for me was discovering the very big and rich, like indigenous, particularly Maya community in the deep South of this country, right? Like I remember like being in South Carolina and in Georgia in like these like Trump red counties. And then suddenly these like indigenous Maya folks that weren't speaking in Spanish, that were speaking like Ma'am y Canjobal, they were there, and they had been there in these counties in red Georgia for decades. But I think when I look at all of these, and I felt like that in the Midwest, I felt like that in the border, like all of these different surprises. But I think what was the beauty that I found in those moments was that there is this younger, again, going back to the younger generation of indigenous Mayas, or the younger generation of Latino Muslims, of trans folks, the younger generation, unlike their parents that sort of were trained to put their head down, be silent, sort of assimilate their identity. Unlike them, the younger ones are proud, and so that to me was like the most impactful thing, being in the South and then seeing like young Mayans that se querían poner los trajes and they wanted to learn Canjobal, unlike their parents. Being in the Central Valley in California and meeting young daughters of farm workers that were proud of being farm workers and wanted to speak out, about those injustices. I think that to me was the most eye-opening thing, this like rejection of the past and people stepping into all of these different identities with a lot more pride than I think, past generations of Latinos have been able to express.
I think the Latinxes in the South or the Midwest, like having lived in Michigan for 3 months, I was completely blown away by that. I think the conversations of having to leave home and realizing these things for yourself was a beautiful part in your book. And I think that was nice to hear.
Thank you.
From young Latinos? Because I think a lot of us are moving away and coming to also experiencing these shocking things that we didn't know. And so your book, yes, go ahead.
No, thank you. No. I was gonna say that. I mean, that was, you know, the book is so much of the book. There's so much pain, and all of it touches on like these like traumas, obviously, that are historic at this point, that are passed from generations. But I think I left the book and I look back at the book understanding that like there is this whole new movement that is just stepping into and leaning into, you know, all of these identities and cultures and in beautiful ways. And so, yeah, anyways, it was, yeah, that gave me hope. When I needed it the most, you know?
I mean, yes, it was nice to read because I think a lot of us sometimes feel stuck, especially when we come back home and then try to navigate these new identities we carry, having learned. I mean, it was, yes. All right. Do we have time for one more question?
I think we had time for the last question. I think number 7 will be a great last question.
Yes. Is it my turn?
Yes.
My turn? Okay. Sorry. See, Anna keeps me on track. All right. So throughout your book, we get glimpses of the life of various Latinxes. But since this is real life, we don't get the ending of their journey. Are you planning to write a follow-up for your readers to continue to follow the journey of Latinx people that you introduced to us?
That's the dream. I mean, of course, you're right. Like that, everything is lingering. I think right now, what I'm sort of trying to focus on is bringing these stories to a screen. You know, I'm telling them on a screen. Seeing if I can, you know, put this concept of finding Latinx in screens that not only are meant for us and for our community, but also for like white folks and Black folks to understand how this is all playing out like among us. And so yeah, there's definitely a follow-up. And so we'll see what this year brings.
You know, 2021.
That would be fabulous, because I could always think like a Netflix documentary, and I was like, yes, that would be great.
I know, if you can
tell the universe,
work your magic, tell the universe.
If it happens, you're doing a program for LAPL.
I know,
for sure.
Okay. I know there's a timer, but I wanted to just address this question in the chat. Mayra, do we have time to just ask it? Because I think it's important to. All right, so I'm going to say about Paola, in Trumpism era, the development of misinformation and fake news has taken over the minds of many Americans, allowing a massive surge of misinformation to be spread. Could you speak about how you as a news contributor could you speak on how you as a news contributor to various outlets?
Like as a news contributed to various outlets and are committed to preventing.
Yes.
I mean, that is, I mean, the one of the most horrific things that I noticed in this election was seeing my own Cuban family, like going back to Miami and seeing just how completely washed their brains have been, to the point that I've been called a communist by like people that I love, and that is what scares me of this new phase, right? Like Donald Trump may be gone, but the lies are still there. The conspiracy theories still live on. And so, we're at a time where the only thing I can do as my job is just go back to the basics, facts. And now we're trying to understand how much how deep is the damage? All we can do right now is talk in facts, and hope that if you have someone you may like him or not, that if the commander in chief and the president of the United States does not lie, I would hope that has some good consequences, right? And so, that's sort of what we're all navigating right now.
Yeah, correct information, real information, and factual information, y'all. We're in the field.
Yeah.
All right, thank you,
Paola. It was great.
Thank you all so much. Truly appreciate this space. It's amazing to have these conversations, especially now. So very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. All right.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ana, Patty, and Paola again for such a wonderful conversation. My name is Asuncion Cora, and I'm a young adult librarian at the New York Public Library. I'm also the president of the Reforma Northeast chapter. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us. So our first presenter is Veronica Cervera from Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial. Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial is a corporate member of Reforma. For more information about this company and their contact information, please visit reforma.org/bookbuzz. And remember to use our hashtag Reforma Book Buzz on social media. Feel free to add your questions to the comment box during the presentation and they will be answered at the end. And as a reminder, today the presentations are being recorded for future viewing. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you for inviting us to this event. We are Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial, have around 50 imprints, and we publish all kind of books every month. We have around 65 new releases. You can get into our mailing list. You will see the email on the presentation as well on the website, and all the books are available through all the main distributors. Let me choose here. Okay, I think I did it right today. So we're starting with nonfiction. We have some biographies here. The first one is by Maria Hess. She's from Spain, and she's the author of our biography of Frida Kahlo. I don't know if you remember that beautiful book. This one is illustrated as well. Marilyn Monroe is one of the most beloved and intriguing icons of the 20th century, and behind the sex symbol of an entire era and the quintessential prototype of the silly blonde, there was a woman who remains a great unknown. One of the things that a lot of people doesn't know about her is that she loved to read. As you see, she Maria Hess wants to portray her in the cover with a book. Let me see. Okay. The second one is Oro de Rey. Luis Miguel, la biografía King's Gold, Luis Miguel, by the authors of the first installment of the biography that inspired the Netflix series. There is supposed to be a second part of the series, but we don't have a date yet. The first book was very popular, and the authors on this one will have confidential information revealed with the release of the book. Yesterday, we have a segment in Univision about it, and we're getting more and more demand of this book hour by hour. This book reveals many unknown faces of this musical star who doesn't grant interviews, but also of a tormented individual, of an idol who could self-destruct at any moment. In this book, we will have his romances described in detail, his disappearances, and also reveals the name and dates of the scandals that has been accompanying him since childhood, including the fate of his mother. This is a memoir, El Consentimiento, Consent, by Vanessa Springora. This book unleashed the Me Too movement in France and sold more than 150,000 copies the first month. Maybe you already have read some articles in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or the New Yorker about this book that will be published in English this month. It's already available for us. Has been the greatest scandal in French literary world last year. 30 years ago, Vanessa Springora was a teenage muse of one of the country's most celebrated writers, a footnote in the narrative of a very influential man in the French literary world. Now in her 40s, she's a director of one of France's leading publishing houses, and in this book, she claimed her own story, offering her perspective of those events sharply known. I'm having a problem like sliding the slides. This other memoir is the new memoir of Don Francisco, Con Ganas de Vivir. I'm sure you all know him. He has been on Hispanic TV for 50 years, for a year. There's some things that we don't know about him that will be revealed on this biography. For example, he was a son of Jewish refugee parents. And a couple of years ago, he just found out about the story of his father. He said that he never wants to talk about it, like a lot of people that were in concentration camps. The book will have a booklet of color photos and will be a unique opportunity to meet these men. All the proceeds will be donated to the Telethon, and Don Francisco is back on TV this month with a 10 episodes new show of interviews at CNN International in Spanish. Now we're going to cookbooks. This is my new book, but I'm not the only author here. I'm sharing the authorship with Alejandra Graf from Mexico, Clara Gonzalez from Dominican Republic, Erika Diño from Colombia, and Laila Pujol from Ecuador. We have here 68 Latin American recipe with full color photos. I have the book here. I can show it to you at the end. This book was made thinking on the Latinos in the US. All the name of the ingredients and the voices of the authors has been respected in each recipe, but at the end we have an index of equivalences to learn the way the ingredients are named in other countries, or to find how we call this ingredient in our country and look for it in the supermarket. I'm very proud of this book. I dreamed about it for years, and I'm sure you will love it as well. Between all of us, we have like 10 million followers on social media, and it is a delicious way to keep our traditions alive. The next cookbook is by our dear and well-known Jimmy Oliver. It's called 7 Ways, Easy Ideas for Every Day of the Week. He chooses main ingredients like chicken breast, salmon fillets, ground beef, eggs, potatoes, broccoli, mushrooms, and he's making recipes with one ingredient for the 7 days of the week. So you can have everything on hand and make your everyday life in the kitchen easier. The book has like 120 recipes, all with photos as well. And it's in the line of the current kitchen trends like batch cooking, prep meals, easy cooking at home. I love this book too. María José Martínez, author of History Best Recipes, Las Mejores Recetas de la Historia, is a blogger and YouTuber from Spain. Her blog, Las Recetas de MJ's Recipes, has more than 1 million followers all over social media. And on this book, you have 30 stories that goes through the history of humanity, and you will have a small biographies of the character, or with a picture of the character, and then a colorful photo of the recipe that has been featured for each of them. We have there Michelangelo, Cleopatra, Frida Kahlo, Albert Einstein. It's a great book for foodies and history fans alike. It's beautiful and unique. Comida Real para Bebés. Real Food for Babies. The authors are from Spain, and they're all mothers that want to have a book to cook for their babies, to provide them with the necessary nutrients and make them grow healthy and happy and liking the healthy food they can have at home. It has more than 50 recipes, all then with colorful photos as well. Dime qué comes y te diré qué bacterias tienes. Tell me what you eat and I'll tell you what bacteria you have. This author is also from Spain. This book is selling a lot there. In 3 months, we sold more than 50,000 copies in Spain. And it has more than 50 recipes for breakfast, snacks, lunch, dinner, desserts, and bread. Blanca is one of the most influential nutritionists of Spain. He shares here the keys to understanding how intestinal bacteria influence our stools, behavior patterns, and their role in disease and quality of life. The good news is that intestinal microbiota is modifiable, and everybody tells us that it depends of our genetic predisposition, but we can change it in our favor, changing our way of life, exercising, having the rest we need, having a good diet, not having alcohol, and so on. Another book by influencers from Spain, El Reto Mariposa, Fun Feed in 28 Days. The authors have a big following here in the US. They're the second YouTubers in the Hispanic world in their category, and it's a plan of 28 days to change your way of life. It has a training plan, a nutrition plan, recipes, and everything with photos, exercises, the recipes. Is beautiful. And it's a good book to try to exercise at home, not that we all have to do that. La meta es el amor, relationships, goals. That book was named one of the best books of the year by Cosmopolitan and was an instant New York Times bestseller. Michael Todd is a lead pastor of Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He speaks at a variety of influential churches, events, and conferences each year. This is his debut publication. And he's a rising star with a big following on social media as well. And this is an inspiring guide to finding lasting love by getting real about your relationship goals, which is the hashtag you can find his content online. The book is based in a viral sermon series about dating, marriage, and sex. El niño, el topo, el zorro y el caballo, the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. I'm sure you know this book. Has been in English for a while. It was the best book of the year by Barnard College in 2019. And at the end of the 2020, the Duchess of Cornwall made an Instagram live with the author that maybe some of you saw. It went viral. For many people, it's like the new Little Prince. It's already a modern classic in the vein of the Tao of Food, The Alchemist, and The Giving Tree. Let's see, I'm not escaping any book. Inglés en 100 días, curso de ciudadanía americana, English in 100 days, English and citizenship course. A lot of you has been asking for an updated guide for the citizenship test. Here it is. We have on this book the new questions for the test, and it will also include 100 intensive classes to enjoy an accelerated course in English and citizenship, and it will have support online, and you can also download an app for additional resources. Doctor Employment. A lot of you are also asking for this kind of books. Jorge Muniain is from Mexico, and we need this book, I think, more than ever because our communities has been hurt by unemployment with the pandemic, like more than ever. The book has 5 chapters by the way of a kind of doctor visit, especially because it identifies the physical and emotional symptoms that affect each patient and prevents them from having a successful job search. It diagnoses the reasons for their unemployment and prescribes medicine as well as tips that will allow the patient to have to make a good resume, to have better personal image, look good in an interview, and at the end, it has a 90-day plan with tasks that you have to take care of to be motivated to find your your ideal job. Okay, this is the first volume of the graphic novel of Sapiens. You all know this book by Harari that has been circulating for years and recommended by Obama and Bill Gates. Is on all the best-selling lists and recommendations forever. And I think this version on graphic novel will bring the book new readers. Maybe people that are afraid of reading such a big book will be preferring to read this version. Viral by Juan Puello. Juan Puello is from Spain, but he lives in Texas. He's an important member of the American Academy of Neurology and professor and researcher in neuro-oncology at MD University, Anderson of University of Texas, where he's dedicated to manipulation of viruses, genetics to treat brain tumors. Written from a scientific, biological, and medical perspective, the book has a clear human component conveyed in the many interesting historical, philosophical, artistic, and literary anecdotes, those making the reference in the scientific flow of information about the pandemic. The book came out in Spain a couple of weeks ago and is having great reviews. Now we have an anthology of Benedetti. He has been one of the most fruitful and popular writers in Latin America. 2020 marked the centenary of the author's birth, and we have this co-edition with Visor, with a prologue and selection by famous Catalan singer and poet Joan Manuel Serrat. Now we're going to fiction. Los Mejores Años, Touch Upon Age. I'm sure you know this book as well. We have the same cover as the English version. It has been finalist and winner of a lot of prizes. Also a book club pick for a lot of publications and reading clubs. It is a striking and surprising debut novel from an exhilarating new voice. It's a page-turning, a big-hearted story about race and privilege set around a young Black babysitter, her well-intentioned employer, and a surprising connection that threatens to undo them both. El Instinto, The Push by Ashley Andre is a Good Morning American book club pick, an instant New York Times bestseller, recommended for readers of the Girl on the Train and Gone Girl. Is also a page-turning psychological drama about the making and breaking of a family. The main character, Blythe, is a mom. Is a new mom with a new weird baby, Violet. Everything is weird about Violet, but no one believes her, not even her husband. And as we read the book, we sometimes doesn't believe her either. But a lot of strange things are happening around, and she cannot feel that connection with the child that the mother is supposed to have. Then she has a new baby, Sam, and she feels that connection, but something happened with Violet and the kid that will change their story forever. The author is from Canada, and this is a debut novel as well. Antes que se enfríe el café, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, is from the editor of Maricondo, a debut novel that sold more than 1 million copies in Japan and is also a bestseller in Europe. It's an easy read, an inspiring read too that appeals to nonfiction readers, and the story happens in a cafe in Tokyo where people go to have the chance to travel back in time.
Hi, Veronica.
Yes.
You have about 1 minute left.
Okay. And like people can have those encounters, but they have to have them before the coffee gets cold. And I'm going fast now since I only have 1 minute. Gambito de Dama, you know the book from the series. The presentation will be on the web, so in case you want to go through, we have a new unpublished book by Marcel Proust, a collection of 8 stories. We have another literary event, an unpublished book by Simone de Beauvoir, a new edition of El Extranjero that is opening the Camus Library in Literatura Random House. We're also having back all the books by Guillermo Cabrera Infante, starting with this one that is his great posthumous novel. A new edition of Paseo de la Reforma by Elena Poniatowska that has been out of the market for a while. The new book by Karina Sainz-Borgo, author of La hija de la Española, which I love. And the Premio Alfaguara, we don't have a cover for it yet, but the winner this year was Pilar Quintana, the author of La Perra, who was shortlisted for the National Book Award in Translated Literature in 2020. I recommend you to read La Perra in the meantime before we get the Premio Alfaguara that will be available in May. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And then I believe we don't have any questions in the chat, but feel free to send them anyways, and we will address them in a little later. So our second presenter is Jenny Lizarraga from Cinco Books. Cinco Books is a corporate member. For more information about this company and contact information, please visit reforma.org/bookbuzz. And remember to use our hashtag ReformaBookBuzz. Feel free to add your questions to the comment box during the presentation, and they will be answered at the end. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Patty, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to the Book Buzz Winter Series. I am Jenny Lizarraga, and I am the founder of Cinco Books. We are a book distributor located in Miami, Florida, and we are specialized in culturally relevant books in Spanish. As of today, we know that there are more than 60 million of Hispanics or Latinos living in the United States. And we read and hear every day that representation matters. And Cinco Books was founded more than a decade ago with the purpose to bridge and connect the community and the self-published authors, independent publishers from Latin America and from Spain and from the United States that were looking to reach out to those Latinos living here. And who is better than the public libraries? I remember living in Chicago many years ago and going to the Chicago Public Library and wondering where some books that I saw in Mexico or Central America or in Argentina, why those books were not here yet. And don't take me wrong, the Chicago Public Library has an amazing collection for Spanish, English, and many other languages. But with so many books published every year, it's so easy to get overlooked. And that's the reason why a company like Cinco Books exists today. And I have made a curated selection, very special for this event today, to show you some books originally written in Spanish and some outstanding translations that I think are worth your attention, and hopefully you can have it in your library. And if you already have it, that's great. If not, you can send me a message or an email later on. This presentation is going to be on a Reforma website, and you can reach out to us through social media, through our website, or info@cincobooks.com. And here in the chat, there is also my information. And before I share the screen, I want to show you a couple of books that I think is better if you see them. This is one of the latest acquisitions that we have. This is Achiote. It's a graphic novel. by Alberto Mott, who is an author from Ecuador. And this is a biographical graphic novel based on his life. And what is interesting about is that there are experiences of his everyday that have some words and expressions and characteristics that are common in South America, especially. So there is the cultural component that we are looking for in our books. Achiote is recommended, is by El Fakir, Ediciones El Fakir. I have also Rulfo, Juan Rulfo, the author of Pedro Páramo y Llano en Llamas. Is a graphic novel based in his life. This is published in Colombia by Rey Naranjo. And my third recommendation on graphic novel today is Gabo, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Gabriel Garcia Marquez wanted to be remembered, not because he was a writer, but because he was a good journalist. That was his dream. And this graphic novel about his life has been translated into 17 languages. It's also published in Colombia by Rey Naranjo. Highly recommended. It won the selection of White Ravens by the International Youth Library in Germany. And also with illustrations for adults. I want to show you Disfraces. Disfraces is a collection of 47 illustrations by Albertine. Albertine is an illustrator that won the Christian Hans Andersen Award. And we know that for an illustrator to be awarded with the Hans Andersen Award is like a Nobel Prize. So I wanted to show you this one, not in slides, but in real life. Published by Ediciones El Zorro Rojo in Spain. And one more before I share my screen is La Perra, La Cerda, La Zorra y La Loba. This is by Nube Ocho, which is known for publishing children's books, but this edition is from a series that they call Nube Pimienta, which is more for young adults and adults. And this is a satirical novel, illustrated, but it's not for kids. And it's about those classic characters like, you know, the dog usually, or the pig and the fox, but why, when it's a female connotation to it, is an insult. It's basically that reflection illustrated. And the characters talk about it and how they are treated in society and how it has been treated in literature as well. So this is my recommendation for you in this topic. Now I'm gonna share my screen so I can show you the other books. Okay, here we go. We saw this one. I have Relatos de Escritoras en Confinamiento en Ficciones. We like to give a voice and a presence to those authors who live here in the United States that are sometimes overlooked. En Ficciones is a collection of short stories by 10 Latina authors who live here in the States. This book was published by Ediciones Aguamiel here in Miami, Florida. Then I have Máquinas Voladoras. We're going to El Salvador with Roxana Mendez. Roxana Mendez wrote this poetry book based on everyday experiences, like going to the market, the garden, meeting someone in the store. This book from El Salvador won the Fundación Cuatro Gatos Award in 2019. Another writer that we love so much is Alicia Partnoy from Argentina. Alicia wrote La Escuelita, and it's a testimony of her own experience during the kidnapping that she suffered in Argentina during the dictatorship. And this is her experience. And La Escuelita is the name of the place where she was kept kidnapped for many months, and how she survived and her resilience. Her story is here. This book has been used in by many universities across the United States to talk about the different dictatorships in Latin America and those political turmoils that have been happening over the years. Alicia lives in California. She is actually a professor at the Loyola Marymount University. This book is published by La Bohemia in Argentina. And there is a documentary recently produced. La Canción del Colibrí by Arte Público Press. Now we are going to Texas with Arte Público Press. Graciela Limón is an awarded author. La Canción del Colibrí is a translation from the English. This book was published initially in 1996, and now Arte Público Press has the version in Spanish. This book is important because it's the story of Colibrí. Colibrí or Huitzilin. In Nahuatl, it means colibrí. And it's the story of the destruction of Tenochtitlan and the resilience and survival of the daughter of Señor de Tenochtitlan. Highly recommended for topics related to how, as humans, we are resilient and how we overcome tragedy. My next recommendation is Luisa en el País de la Realidad by Claribel Alegría. Claribel Alegría is from Nicaragua. This book is published by La Pereza Ediciones here in Florida. Claribel Alegría has been writing poetry and novels about democracy, social justice, and peace. And this is called her favorite book. It's a book full of poems related to those topics. Now we're going to Ecuador again with La Cocina del Ecuador. Recetas y lecturas by Julio Pasos Barrera. Julio Pasos Barrera is a researcher, is a chef, and he represents the regional cuisine andina. This book contains a lot of recipes and also stories related to the cuisine in Ecuador. The publisher is El Casqui Ediciones, also from Ecuador. And then we come back to California and Puerto Rico with Maritere Rodriguez Bellas. I think some of you probably know her. She's a Puerto Rican living in Los Angeles. Arroz con Pollo and Apple Pie is a book available in English and Spanish. We carry both editions, but right now I'm showing you only the Spanish version. This book was awarded the International Latino Book Award, and it's a self-published book recommended for topics related how to raise bilingual and bicultural children. Now I have a novel for you with a little bit of dark stories, historical fiction. Vivir Abajo was a finalist on Bienal Mario Vargas Llosa. And it's a trip to the United States, starting in Peru, going to Europe, with a lot of historical events, like when Ismael Guzman was captured in Peru. Ismael Guzman was one of the leaders of Sendero Luminoso, the terrorist group in the 90s in Peru. And I want to continue under the same spirit of dark literature with El Corazón de las Tinieblas. This is a translation. Vivir Abajo is actually originally written in Spanish. El Corazón de las Tinieblas is a translation from the English and is considered one of the best novels of the 20th century. It was written by Joseph Conrad, who was a Polish and English writer, and is historical fiction based on the trade of ivory in Africa. And this book inspired the movie Apocalypse Now, the Francis Ford Coppola. This is an illustrated version by Ediciones del Zorro Rojo. The illustrator is Enrique Breccia. My next recommendation today is El hilo invisible de la naturaleza by Gianluberto Acinelli. This is also a translation published by Ediciones del Zorro Rojo, and it's those different stories that has changed the course of nature and the way we live now. So I think in the next edition of this book, COVID-19 is going to be included. A little bit of oral tradition, and we are going to travel to Mexico with Aquí Todos Estamos Muertos, a compilation of stories from the area, the region of Quintana Roo in Mexico. José Luis Trueba, the author, is a professor and a researcher of oral tradition. So this is a study that he did, and it was just released last year by Ediciones Castillo. And then we are going to Russia with this classic of literature, El pájaro de fuego y otros cuentos rusos, de Alexander Afanasiev. And it's my understanding that this book has been out of the market for many decades, and now Ediciones del Zorro Rojo comes with an illustrated version by Ivan Bilibin. And this is just a brief selection of books that I wanted to put together to show you today. And I will be more than happy to share a more complete selection. For the timing today, I think I'm good with the timing. So if anyone has any questions, I am welcoming those. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. And that was my cat, by the way.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, guys.
If anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat. Her contact information is also in the chat.
Thank you, guys.
So our third presenter is Alexandra. Oh, somebody asked if you will provide the list of books.
I can provide a list, or if you send me an email, well, my email is here, but I'll write it again here in the chat, and I can send it to you right away. Thank you. And my cat name is Sylvester, and he's a Hemingway cat, by the way. He's a rescue. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Our third presenter is Alexandra Torrealba from Vintage Español. For more information about this company and contact information, please visit reforma.org/bookbuzz. And remember to use our hashtag #ReformaBookBuzz on social media. Feel free to add your questions to the comment box during the presentation, and they will be answered at The end. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Just want to check that the presentation is working well and everyone can see. All good?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Alexandra Torrealba, and I'm very excited to share with all of you some of the highlights and new releases that we'll be publishing this year at Vintage Español, which, as some of you may know, just joined Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial earlier this year. I just want to begin today by talking to you about just a few titles from late last year. And I know some of us just want to forget about 2020, but here are a few books from last year that I was particularly thrilled to include in our list. The first, of course, is Latinx, the wonderful book by journalist Paola Ramos, who you just heard from today. Published simultaneously with the English edition last October, Latinx en busca de las voces que redefinen la identidad latina takes millions of young Latinos, including the author herself, on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment, shedding light on the voices that have been brewing yet overlooked for years. This is a fascinating book, from Afro-Latinos to trans-Latinos, border-town Latinos to the young Cuban Americans in Miami. This book will give life to the cryptic term Latinx. Hopefully not so cryptic after you read this book. Paola Ramos travels near and far corners of the country in search of Latino voices that illustrate a growing movement and represent a community of young Latinos that hold more political, social, and cultural relevance today than ever before. This is a supremely important educational book that reads like a friendly, intimate conversation. It cracks open so many taboos and misconceptions that exist within our community, and I'm so happy with how well it has been received so far. I also want to bring back a young adult crossover novel by Isabel Quintero that really made an impact last fall. When Gabby, A Girl in Pieces was first published in 2014, it made Kirkus Reviews and School Library Journal's best books lists. It tells the story of a precocious Latina teenager eating and starving and fighting and writing her way through the crushing pressures of high school boy desire, religious approval, and Mexican cultural taboos. Written in the form of diary journal entries, this book is stunning and takes credit for spotlighting Isabel Quintero firmly and boldly in the YA space. The next one, I think, is a must-have in every library, the Spanish edition of Susan Cain's remarkable book, Quiet. El Poder de los Introvertidos shows how dramatically our culture has come to misunderstand and undervalue introverts, and gives introverts the tools to take full advantage of their strengths. This book set off a movement, truly, and rightfully so. It's perhaps the most complete book out there on the subject. If you haven't read it yet, I promise it will permanently change how you see introverts and also how they see themselves. And finally, one of our stars from late fall is Carlos Ruiz Zafón's fascinating posthumous collection of his beloved stories, some of them unpublished, together for the first time in a single volume. Ruiz Zafón is one of the most respected, widely read authors in the Spanish literary world, and Vintage Español has been home to his last 5 works before he passed away last year. It's a must-read for his longtime fans, but it's also a spectacular standalone work for anyone who enjoys thrilling yet profoundly tender fiction. So now on to 2021. We began the year with Mariana Enriquez's latest novel, Our Share of Night, or Nuestra Parte de Noche. Some of you may know about Enriquez from her very successful novel, Las Cosas que Perdimos en el Fuego, or The Things We Lost in the Fire. This time she comes to us with a haunting, daring novel in which supernatural terror overlaps with the very real horrors of daily life. It tells the story of a father and a son who embark on a road trip across Argentina. It's the era of a military regime in the country. The tension in the air is palpable, and every few kilometers their trip is interrupted by armed soldiers. But this isn't any road trip. Gaspar's father is trying to protect his son from the destiny he was granted at birth, after his mother died under mysterious circumstances, allegedly in an accident that perhaps wasn't so. Like his father, Gaspar is called to act as a medium in a secret society, La Orden, whose members seek eternal life through despicable rituals. Their need for a medium is vital, but the chosen ones, those displaying special powers, are granted a cruel destiny filled with mental and physical exhaustion. Enriquez explores the relationship between a father and his son, the emotional weight of an atrocious legacy, and the oppression of a military dictatorship followed by the uncertain arrival of democracy and the first outbreak of AIDS in Argentina. Enriquez has a true talent for writing about life and death, the horrendous and the intimate, and Nuestra Parte de Noche is certainly not an exception. Coming out in just a few days, I'm particularly excited about Bill Gates' much-awaited book on a subject that we should all be caring about deeply, right here and right now. In How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, or Cómo Evitar un Desastre Climático, Gates explains why he cares so much about climate change and what makes him optimistic that the world can prevent the worst impacts of the climate crisis. He shares what he learns in more than a decade of studying climate change, and investing in innovations to address the problems. As a technologist, he has seen firsthand how innovation can change the world. By investing in research, inventing new technologies, and by deploying them quickly and at a large scale, Gates believes that climate change can be addressed in very meaningful ways. It's even a matter of social justice, really. Climate change, according to Gates, will have the biggest impact on the people who have done the least to cause it. The goal, he says, is to get to net zero emissions of greenhouse gases. It's urgent, it's complex, but it can be done. The topic of this book is universal, interesting, and important to readers regardless of the language they speak, which is why I'm so happy we are able to bring this to our audience at the same time as the English edition makes a huge splash worldwide. Next up is a Chinese classic that should be in everyone's personal library, or at least in your professional library, because for those of you who aren't familiar with it, believe it or not, this beautiful text by Chinese philosopher and general Sun Tzu is widely admired today by both military and business strategists. For more than 2,000 years, it has provided leaders with essential management advice and has also become a touchstone in the West for achieving success, whether on the battlefield or in business. Now, because this book is in the public domain, you'll find there are several editions out there. But what makes ours particularly special is that it was translated to Spanish from the original Chinese and not from the English by philosopher and professor Alejandro Bárcenas, in order to ensure nothing was lost in translation and the integrity of the text is preserved as closely as possible to the original. It's truly a brilliant, brilliant book. All right, so calling one of the books you published your favorite is as morally crushing as trying to pick a favorite child, but I'm willing to make an exception for La Fórmula Despacito coming this spring. I don't think you need much context here. Remember that song that played incessantly over and over and over again in every radio station, nightclub, remember those? And summer barbecue in 2017? Please don't make me sing it. That's right, Despacito by Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee. But have you ever wondered what exactly made that song so catchy and why it is, to date, the most watched music video in history? 6 billion views for anyone wondering. In fact, in the US, it became the first song primarily in Spanish to top the Billboard Top 100 since La Macarena by Los del Rio in 1996. Don't worry, you'll also get to read a chapter about that dance party favorite too. Those and so many more hits are included in this absolutely fantastic behind-the-scenes oral history of the greatest hits of Latin music in the past 50 years. Organized in chronological order and based exclusively on interviews with each one of the artists and masterminds behind the songs, each chapter is dedicated to one hit, be it Enrique Iglesias' Living la Vida Loca, Selena's Como una Flor, or Juan Luis Guerra's Burbujas de Amor. So you know that while editing this manuscript, I just had to pull up each song on Spotify to set the mood. A very, very fun ride indeed, but also one that leaves behind an incredibly important historical record of songs that, in many cases, changed the course of Latin music in this country and the way English-speaking as well as Spanish-speaking listeners perceive it. That's why it was also important for us to publish this in English as well, and both editions will come out simultaneously in March of this year. You'll indulge in never-before-heard anecdotes from the artists themselves, and I promise you, this book will make your hips sway. Also coming in early March, right in time for International Women's Day is, you know it, Isabel Allende's newest work, Mujeres del Alma Mía, titled Woman of My Soul in English. This time she graces us with her first nonfiction work since 2008, a shorter than usual but beautiful book that tries to answer a question that, honestly, she explores in every single one of her books in one way or another. What do women want? sprinkled with stories of her childhood, when she bore witness to her mother being abandoned by her father and having to raise 3 kids on her own, to her early adulthood, which coincided with the world's first wave of feminism, and she finally found a tribe of like-minded women, to her adulthood and the experiences she lived during all 3 of her very passionate marriages. Reading Allende in nonfiction is superbly refreshing, but undoubtedly so, she still manages to pay tribute to her marvelous fiction. All in all, she concludes that what women want is to be safe, to be valued, to live in peace, to have their own resources, to be connected, to have control over their bodies and lives, and above all, to be loved. On all these fronts, there is much work to be done, and with this book, Allende hopes to light the torch of our daughters and granddaughters with mine. They will have to live for us as we lived for our mothers, and carry on with the work still left to be finished. So who's ready for some rest and meditation after this past year? I know I sure am. And who best to share his knowledge about it than Deepak Chopra? In Meditación Total, or Total Meditation, he offers a complete exploration and reinterpretation of the physical, mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual benefits that this practice can bring. Deepak guides readers on how to wake up to new levels of awareness that will ultimately cultivate a clear vision, heal suffering in your mind and body, and help recover who you really are. With meditation quickly becoming the fastest growing trend in the United States, this book is essential for all who want to elevate their practice to achieve higher consciousness and a more fulfilling experience. And what's best about it is that it's not all conceptual. The book includes dozens of awareness exercises and concludes with a 52-week program developed by Chopra himself to help revolutionize every aspect of your life. Following this same line of wellness books, the next 2 books I'd like to talk to you about have become classics in self-empowerment space in Latin America. We still don't have covers for these, but here's a photo of the author, Jorge Bucay, an Argentinian psychotherapist, psychodramatist, and writer. His books have sold more than 2 million copies worldwide and have been translated into more than 17 languages. There are very few authors in the psychology and self-help field in Spanish that are as acclaimed and recognized as Jorge Bucay. We are already published 2 of Bucay's backlist books last year. The 3rd one we will be publishing is Cartas to Claudia, or Letters to Claudia, a compilation of letters addressed to a fictional character that delve into issues of love, responsibility, happiness, loss, death, and grieving. They are reflections of personal experiences that truly are universal. The 2nd book will be Las Tres Preguntas, or The 3 Questions. Who am I? Where am I going? And with whom? In the search of happiness, all paths are valid and different, but they overlap at one point, the point at which every human needs to find answers to these important existential questions, which are at the very center of this insightful book. In trying to answer these questions, we are faced with a task that we are all obliged to undertake sooner or later, the definitive encounter with ourselves, with the fundamental purpose of our existence, and with the process of opening up ourselves to love and finding our true life companions. And when psychotherapy doesn't work, why not try a mojito? Cócteles de América Latina, or Spirits of Latin America, is Vintage Español's first recipe book for drinks. Drawing inspiration from her many travels to the region, bartender Ivy Mix explores the history and culture of Latin American spirits in this stunningly photographed travelogue, with 70 irresistible cocktails featuring tequila, rum, pisco, and more. But that's not all. She also delves into the cultural and historical context behind each drink in order to better understand its roots and composition, essentially finding that Latin spirits echo the Latin palate, which echoes Latin life, emphasizing spiciness, vivaciousness, strength, and variation. Ivy Mix is also the owner of the Brooklyn bar Leyenda, and the recipes for her most acclaimed drinks are in this book too. I've heard time and again that libraries are looking for good cookbooks in Spanish, and I hope you'll consider this one for your list too. The mouthwatering photos and gorgeous travel images are truly, truly special. Changing gears a little now to talk about a very cool and inspirational memoir we are publishing later this fall. In case you haven't heard from him before, Michael Simon is a teen entrepreneur and programmer who created an iOS app development company at 13 years old, 13, after teaching himself to code. Since then, he has gone to create dozens of apps, which have been downloaded more than 3 million times worldwide. At 17, straight from high school, Michael became Facebook's youngest employee ever, building new features that wowed Mark Zuckerberg. These features are now being used by more than 500 million people every day. 3 years later, he jumped ship for Google. But this isn't only a story about making it in Silicon Valley. Michael is the son of Peruvian immigrants who came to this country in search of the American dream, like so many. And at a point in time when his family went through deep financial struggle, he actually became the primary breadwinner with the sales of his self-made apps. In this candid and uplifting memoir, Michael shares the highs and lows, the successes and failures of this remarkable journey. He has since become an inspiration to thousands of kids across the United States and Latin America, and has traveled throughout the hemisphere giving talks that inspire young people to follow their own path and march to the beat of their own drum. In late fall of this year, we will also be publishing El Infinito en un Junco, which translates to Infinity in a Reed. This is a book about the history of books, perfect for book lovers, history buffs, and anyone who is curious to know the origins of one of our most prized cultural symbols. It's an unforgettable journey through the life of books and those who have preserved them for over 30 centuries. You'll learn the history of its fabrication, the fascinating ways in which it has traveled through time and space, from the battlefields of Alexander to the palace of Cleopatra, all the way into the 21st century. This book totally exploded when it was published in Spain last year, ultimately winning the coveted National Prize for Essay. It's one of those literary gems that takes us all by surprise, and I'm sure it would be a most valuable addition to any library collection. And finally, in December, we'll be publishing a Spanish edition of a book that also deserves a spot, not just in libraries, but also in every home. Death is both one of the most natural occurrences in our human existence, yet it's also one of the hardest things to talk about and grapple with. And somehow it seems the people who have come into closest contact with death emerge from the experience with knowledge, grace, and in David Kessler's case, a groundbreaking book. In Finding Meaning, which will be entitled Encuentra el Significado in Spanish, Kessler draws from deep research and personal experience, going beyond the classic 5 stages of grief to discover a 6th stage, meaning. The sudden loss of his 21-year-old son inspired Kessler to embark on a journey that ultimately led him to teach physicians, nurses, counselors, police, and first responders about the end of life. He provides a roadmap to remembering those who have died with more love than pain, and to move forward with our lives in a way that honors those who are no longer with us. This is a vital guide to healing from tremendous loss, written by a true expert, and is sure to become a seminal addition to grief literature. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and also encourage you to reach out to me directly if you're interested in hearing more about our publishing program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. We don't have any questions in the chat. I'm going to give them a few seconds to see if someone, I'm not missing anything. I hope not. Oh, wait. Okay, we have one. Someone said great selection of books. Ana Campos, great selections of books. So thank you so much, Alexandra.
Thank you.
Our last presenter is Asdrubal Hernandez from Sadukia Group, LLC. For more information about this company and contact information, please visit reforma.org/bookbuzz. And remember to use our hashtag #ReformaBookBuzz. Feel free to add your questions to the comment box during the presentation, and they will be answered at the end. Welcome, Asdrubal.
Yes, hi. Well, let me share the screen. Okay, so I am Asdrubal Hernandez. I'm the founder and publisher of Sudakia Editores. That started almost 10 years ago here. And we basically focus on publishing books written originally in Spanish by Latin American authors in the US or elsewhere. And our main market is the United States. My presentation, well, I have some couple of books that I would like starting remember from that we have published because I consider they're pretty has been important in our 10 years, and well, and okay, so we have two collections. The collections we have four collections actually, but collection Sudakia is basically fiction. These four books I'm showing here are very important. Blue Level Etiqueta Azul is one of the most important novels published about the Venezuelan reality. And it has been translated to English. It has another languages. It also has a film, and it has to be with a girl that is graduating from high school and wants to find her French grandfather somewhere in Venezuela that she hasn't met because I don't, and she wants to find him, so he recognized her as his granddaughter, so she can get the French nationality and leave the country. And it's all the story with one of friends that they go through Venezuela trying to find this guy. The second one is El fin de la lectura by Andrés Neumann. I think I don't have to introduce Andrés at all. And this is a book of very short stories, or yeah, it's short stories, and sometimes it's just like even like half a page thing. But it's pretty intense, and well, like Andrés, like everything that Neumann writes is amazing. The next one is Para Comerte Mejor by Giovanna Rivero. Giovanna is one of the greatest Bolivian authors right now, and she lives in Florida. She's a teacher there in a university. This book has to do it's short stories, and it shows the dark side of humans, and you can find here many. It has to do with witchery and cannibals and zombies and a lot of crazy dark side things. And the last one is Instrucciones para ser feliz by Maria Jose Navia. She's a Chilean. This was her first storybooks, and well, she explores the different stories about. The title comes from one of the stories, and this one has to do with someone that is going to die and discover how to be happy. This collection emphasis is it's nonfiction, and here I choose three books to show you. One is Siempre nos quedará Madrid by Enrique del Risco. This is one of our best-selling books ever. Actually, this book, when we published it back on 2012, was the best-selling book on nonfiction in Amazon, and it's basically all the story of how Enrique left Cuba and arrived to Spain, to Madrid, and how he felt like he was reborn when he arrived to Madrid, and all the process of the following 2 years with all his experiences there, and it's like a parallel story comparing like what he's living in Spain and what actually was to live in Cuba. Basically, book ends when he comes to the States, to New York, and well, it's one of the greatest books. Pobes El Uruguayo by Francisco Herrera Luque. Herrera Luque is a classic Venezuelan author. This is one of his most important books. There's also a film about this, and it's a historic novel about Jose Tomas Boves, which was a Spanish general that fought in Venezuela against the independence, and how all the culture that he finds there, influence him, and all the army he built from people there and until he's dead. But it's amazing because Herrera Luque, he was a psychiatric, and he also did a huge research to write this book. And he presents, basically what he presents in this book is the profile of what later on we will call El Caudillo. He says basically that Boves was the first caudillo in all Latin America. And well, it's all this story and his analysis about that. And the last one is Historias Insólitas de los Mundiales de Fútbol by Luciano Guernique. He is one of the most important Argentinian journalists in soccer. We also published another book by him, which is Historias Insólitas de la Copa América. Both books, this one has to do with the stories of each World Cup, and stories that happen in parallel to the game. It doesn't talk much about the games itself, but things that happen around it. Same thing with the Copa America. He also has written some biographies and story of soccer and many other books, but this book is very nice, and probably for the next World Cup we are publishing an updated version of this book, including Russia, because this book go all the way to Brazil, to the Brazil World Cup on 2014. So now I'm going to talk about the books that some of the books we published last year and some that we already published this year. This book is also a novel by a Venezuelan author called Fedosky Santaella. And basically this is a hilarious story of a police guy called Theophilus Jones that basically he received the mission to protect a cat, but it happens that the owner of the cat is the dictator of the country. So he has to be very careful about taking care of this cat and all the adventures around taking care and protecting the cat. This novel called Buenos, Limpios y Lindos by Vera Forhill was the last book we published last year. This book was finalist on Premio Herralde in 2012. And it's basically a book about one person that it dies, and basically she starts to narrating the stories of all the other persons that are with her in the morgue, and how they took decisions that led them to be there in that moment. Like how each of these persons got to be in the morgue that day, and their stories and everything behind it. And she touches a lot of different topics, including the thing that other interesting thing about this book is that the Anna is the protagonist of the book, and her husband used to work as a crew of Gustavo Cerati. And so basically she became obsessed with Cerati, and there's a lot of influence of the Cerati music and his thoughts in the book. There are even quotes from him. There are even chapters named after songs of Soda Stereo or Cerati. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting book. This is one of the new books happening by Gustavo Valle. This book won the transgeneric prize by in Venezuela. That transgeneric, it's a prize that it's given to different. To it doesn't matter the genre. So it competed against essays and stories and poetry and well, this was the chosen one, and that was on 2013, and it won the Critic Prize on 2014 in Venezuela too. And this book it starts with a transit accident, and it's the story of Alex Cantor and all his story through Venezuela and his memory, and basically how he analyzes and talks about the modern world and the conflicts that we have every day. Texarkana is the first book by Colombian author Ivan Parra Garcia. He's now a teacher in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, and this book has to do with the different stories that happen in Texarkana, and how all these stories has to do with immigrants or different things that are happening in the same place, which creates kind of a worldwide vision of the town. This collection, Cangrejo, it's noir and crime. This book, La Chica Must Pop the South Beach, is actually a short story book by Pedro Medina Leon. We have published 3 books by him before. Varsovia, which won the Florida Book Award in 2017. Then we published Marginal, and the last one is Americana. All those books are novels, and it's kind of it's the series of El Comanche, which is kind of the contrary of James Bond. It's more like a loser guy who solves situations and crimes and stuff. But in this book, it's basically short stories that were written around while he was writing all these 3 novels. So there are characters that comes from those stories, and you can learn different other things about them. But in the other hand, you can discover new visions of Miami and South Beach that are not in those books. That's why one of the critics about this book was that to understand Miami, you have to read Pedro Medina Leon, but to understand Pedro Medina Leon, you have to read La Chica Must Pop the South Beach, because it's a very like internal book. It's I want to finish up mentioning our two anthologies. This one was published originally back on 2016. This book, well, it's short stories written by authors that live, or they live right now or used to live in the US, and stories in some way related to the US and the fact of being immigrant and all that. And the selection was and the prologue was written by Antonio Diaz Oliva, the Chilean author. And well, I'm gonna, and all the authors that are in this book is Maximiliano Barrientos, Juan Álvarez, Fernanda Trias, Encio Neira, Sebastián Antesana, Luis Hernán Castañeda, Esteban Mallorca, Carlos Yushimito. Well, the whole list there, Martina Bronner, Aura Estrada. But it's very interesting how each of them, you know, develop their stories. It's a very wide way to show what is happening with people writing in the U.S. in Spanish. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is Ellas Cuentan, which is a antología de crime fiction por latinoamericanas in Estados Unidos. This book is a crime fiction, as the title, well, it's mentioned in the subtitle. And these are short stories written by these 13 different authors from 13 different, from different countries in Latin America. All of them live here in the US. These ones are Kiani Antigua, Oriet D'Angelo, Anajet Delgado, Margarita Drago, Teresa Doublepage, Azucena Hernandez, Daenerys Machado Bento, Melanie Marquez Adams, Gisela Meneses, Juana M. Ramos, Jennifer Thorndike, Joanny Vasquez Paz, and Cristina Zabalaga. This book, well, written by women, and because and the selection was done by Gisela Meneses and Melanie Marquez Adams, and it's a book that we published on 2019, but because 2020 was like non-existent, we basically that's what the book is keeping. It's still there, giving things to talk, and it's very interesting because it portrays different situations, and it's not only in the US, but they're located like in the different parts of Latin America, including the old San Juan in Puerto Rico, or somewhere in Caracas, or well, it's very nice. I really recommend this book. Well, that's all. Any question or that you have, I'm here to help you out. And you can write central@sudakia.net, or even you can write Asdrubal, which is my direct mail, asdrubal@sudakia.net. And well, thanks, and I hope you like it.
Thank you so much, Asdrubal. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and as he mentioned, his contact information is also in the chat. So a big thank you to Paola Ramos and all the presenters from Penguin Random House, Grupo Editorial, Cinco Books, Vintage Español, and Sudakia Group LLC. This was the third event of the Reforma Virtual Spanish Language Book Buzz Winter Series, which featured 18 distributors and publishers. We have 2 more sessions scheduled, so you can visit reforma.org/bookbuzz to register for our future events.
We also want to say Reforma is an affiliate of the American Library Association. We're bringing this program series free of charge. If you would like to support Reforma, consider becoming a member, volunteering, or donating. For more information, go to reforma.org/get-involved. Next Thursday, February 11th, our keynote speaker will be Yuyi Morales and Chao Luna, Penguin Random House Library Marketing, Scholastic, Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial, and Cinco Books will also join and present their new children and young adult titles. Los esperamos. So I don't see any questions on Susion in the chat. Do you? No.
Nope.
All right. Just a lot of thank yous to everyone. This was a great presentation. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, Ana.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.